You would be still learning about unlearning by thinking of it as a mental health piece. And
yes,
like that's a whole other thing I learned, and I know you and I have talked about it, is that when people talk about taking care of yourselves and your health, people think about exercise or eating right or whatever.
Right.
No. Your health is to take care of your entire vessel and being.
Yes.
And that's something that I unlearned that was a huge thing. Like mental health is absolutely, it's your brain.
Right.
Like it's your brain, it's your emotional functioning. It's everything that you are day in and day out on top of your muscular system, your skeletal system, your, all of that.
Hi, I'm Amber.
And I'm Elayna. We're glad you're here to join us where
everything is learning. Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going, man. I tell you what, I know you and I have been on an unlearning journey for a hot minute.
Yeah.
For a long time. Like I know, especially let me back up. Since learning is everything, right? We are constantly learning. We don't recognize it all the time, but we really are. And a lot of the things that we're learning, especially without realizing it, are like messages about how we're supposed to be, who we're supposed to be. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I feel like oftentimes I don't meet those requirements, those expectations, those whatever it is.
Those boxes.
Yeah.
Society puts us in. The norms of society that honestly you can't even locate where sometimes they come from.
Just so many things about like how we're supposed to be. And it is always like this one size fits all expectation.
Right.
And nobody is we are not even close to the same. There's no one size fits all anything.
I know. It's wild.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And again, I know I've said this before, but like, thank God. Like, we are all different and we're all different for so many reasons. Why don't we celebrate that?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, why? I don't know. I think differences are amazing.
No, I do too. And you and I know fundamentally that the process of unlearning is like oceans of depth. Like there's just so much we do it all the time, whether we are intentional or unintentional with it. I think the really interesting part of learning and unlearning is, you're right, the sometimes non-intent in doing it and experiencing it. It's just so hard. And I'm so glad that there are so many voices out there nowadays talking about going opposite. Like I think unlearning and going opposite are
they're really related.
Synonymous.
Yep.
But what is unlearning to you? Let's just define it.
That's a good idea, though. We love a good operational definition, don't we?
We really
do.
do.
I think of unlearning as so, when I talk about learning, I talk about like I think there are 4 major steps of learning, right?
Right.
And a lot of times that happens subconsciously, unconsciously, whatever. Intentional learning. So we take information in,
right?
We somehow process it, we store it, we use it, right?
Right.
And for a lot of things, it'll be like maybe a message that we received. When it would be something like, if you're not getting straight A's, you're not good enough, or you're not smart.
Right.
Right. And so like, okay, well, that's the message. Okay. I got to get straight A's. That's how I know I'm smart and
have value.
And I was just about to say the exact same thing. That's an extension of it, right? Because if I'm smart, I've heard enough that smartness,
intelligence.
Thank you. I was like, that's not smart to say that. That's fine. I know. Thank you. Intelligence is a value. So if I don't have intelligence, I have no value or less value, maybe, right? When in reality, what's actually happening is that you are being forced to demonstrate your intelligence in one specific way. But your intelligence might be best shown in a very different way.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or maybe you weren't taught in a way that information was made sense to you so that you could demonstrate your intelligence with it. Whatever the case may be.
Yeah. The profundity of that too is it also, that those kind of messages that are sent, if they are sent to young children, which is really where most of it forms, is in elementary school, I think. The profundity of it is the fact that because children are not able to emotionally regulate, they take it in as the extremes, as this
as
is
Bible, as truth. I mean, they're little sponges. That's all they know is what they are getting. You know what I mean? Right. And they don't, that nuance and complexity, like this is all brand new information to a child, right? Brand new information. They don't have the ability to have a filter to funnel that through and process out what they shouldn't take from it. You know what I mean?
Which is what unlearning really is. I love that idea of funneling information.
Yes.
That's a great way of looking at it.
And I think that's why unlearning should at least start out as a conscious thing, right? Because you need to sit there and identify, question, challenge, and then replace all of these messages that you've just inherently learned. But we soak them in, and we because we're babies when we hear them. So they are set as truth, as unwavering truth in our mind. This is the barometer for me and my value for a lot of people. And I think that because of that, like we have to say, hang on. If I can't do calculus, that says nothing about me being intelligent. It just means I can't do calculus.
Right.
Like a lot of things are more black and white than we infer them to be, I guess. But you have to sit and consciously challenge these things. So to me, that's kind of like what that unlearning is.
I mean, my functioning definition, it was really interesting to actually sit and like type it and then challenge myself to say, that's not it. So what I came up with was the intentional act, which is what you were just talking about.
Yeah.
Of analyzing what you do not fully agree with or feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
And then identifying the origin of that belief or thought.
Yeah.
To choose how you want to move forward and change or learn a better way or better path forward.
Yes.
And I you know, unlearning is a lot about getting to know you and what you believe.
100%. Like, I think, I would say, honestly, it's crucial to understanding yourself and accepting yourself.
Oh, 100%.
Because
it takes
it's
a
like
great deal of honesty.
Yes.
To do this. It really does.
But at the same time, there's so much, like, and it can be hard. It can be a hard thing to, like, identify. But, like, I personally have found a lot of freedom in it.
Oh, I found enormous amounts of freedom and knowledge and power.
Because you're sitting there and you're like, okay, wait a second. So why am I telling myself that I'm not smart when look at all these things I can do. Look at all these things I excel at.
Right.
What? And like another thing that's helped me with it is talking to myself and treating myself as if I'm talking to my best friend about some of these things.
Oh, yeah. That's a skill. That is a life skill that people do not learn. They have to learn it on their own because it's really not taught.
No, but like, you know, I'm a huge fan personally of the golden rule, right? Like do unto others as you would do unto yourself.
Sure.
But I've always used it in like how I treat other people.
Yes.
And not really in how I treat myself. So like if I would treat someone else and love them and be like, dude, what are you saying? That's not even close to true. I should be willing to do that same thing for myself. And so like those two things, the more I unlearn, the more I'm better at treating myself that way.
Oh yeah.
And it kind of becomes
There's nothing easy about realizing that you're the one holding yourself back. There's nothing There's nothing easy about that at all.
Can I just tell you that statement though, kind of like that's
really what unlearning
is.
If somebody tells you that your value or implies that your value is in intelligence, we've been talking about, or in kindness or whatever
it may be,
there's no success in that. The only success is in unlearning that whatever someone is projecting onto you, it is not something you need to accept. and that you are the one holding yourself back by living in a truth that is not your own.
Right.
That really is. And that's why I think the why of unlearning, you and I talk about this all the time. Why is it so important? It's because it will change your life. It will change the life of a child. It will change the life.
Yes.
It's a radical act of self-love and healing.
Yes.
It really is.
And I mean, that's the thing. Like, when I'm working with kids, I feel like most of the time I am not teaching content of any kind. Yeah. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm a tutor, but like, I feel like most of the time my tutoring is just in like, bruh, you got this. What do you know about yourself? How can we make this work for you? But like, you can do it. We just have to figure out the way that works for you. And not everyone's the same. Like, and so much of like, sit and figure it out. I'm here. I got you. You're not alone. You can do this. And just helping them find their own value. And it's crazy how young it starts.
Oh, I mean,
that's the scary part.
Yeah, it starts younger than it's between, I think the ages of 3 and 5 is really where it starts to go downhill, because that whole concept of it's not cute anymore to not understand and follow directions and do what you're supposed to be doing.
Right. And like, I mean, even like, I wrestle with this a lot, that expectation of just following directions, because I'm like,
or sitting in a seat. I cannot.
Oh yeah. Listen, I don't sit still.
Right.
As a grown adult in this big old age, I physically can't sit still for extended periods of time. No. How am I expecting a child to do that?
No. And you and I both know, which maybe not everybody knows, it is Googleable, but there are certain amounts of time at certain ages that children should be sitting for and can take in information and actually learn, actively learn, like intentionally learn. Yeah. And even at our age, what is it? Like, we're able to do 35 minutes at this point?
Yeah, it's really not that long.
Yeah, it's not that long.
Now, listen, if I kick my hyper focus into gear, I can sit here for a minute and really go.
But you're choosing.
I'm choosing it, and I've tapped into I've tapped into my autopilot, autofocus kind of a thing. But yeah, it's and I think a lot of it is how we approach ourselves as the adults, and then how we use that, and then also approach kids, and just kind of feeding into them. But it's so much for me, that social norm of like trying to fit a square peg, a triangular peg, an octagonal peg. I don't even know, something that's not even a peg anymore, and just like all into the same hole. Right? Because to me, social norms, because that's what I think a lot of it is like these social norms or social beliefs that we have that we haven't, that just get passed on. It's almost like that's one of the biggest generational curses or traumas you can extend, is just this. We are supposed to all be the same person and meet these same expectations, but that's just not true.
Right.
That's just not true. And because you wouldn't expect everyone to be an Albert Einstein.
No.
And if we're all Albert Einsteins, then
there's no Albert Einstein.
Then who is that's true too. But who's taking care of the other stuff? You know what I mean? Who's the Benjamin Franklin? Who's the oh my gosh, I totally just blanked out. George Washington Carver. Who's the I've tried to come up with people's names, and all of a sudden I can think of nothing and nobody. But like, everyone is a genius in their own way.
Right.
What if we, instead of trying to make everyone fit into the same hole, what if instead we said, I want to find your genius?
Yeah.
Like that, I think would change and do a lot of help in that unlearning thing, right? Because we wouldn't have as much to unlearn from, first off.
Right.
Because it would be about finding everyone's unique strengths and celebrating that. And like, okay, cool, let's use that.
I think people would have so much more buy-in in their education. And I do mean formal, traditional education. Because if you had a class where you sat down and you said, okay, who are you? Now you are none of those things. Who are you really?
Right.
And like teaching children at a young age who they want to be, but revisiting that every single year is absolutely the most impactful thing that someone can do for a child.
And you said, setting. Did you say who they want to be or what they want to be?
Anything. who they want to be, who they are, what they want to be.
Because to me, one of the things about unlearning, I'm sorry to cut you off there, is like that so we need to separate like who we think we're supposed to be from who we really are.
100%. Yeah.
And like just kind of aligning who we are with our goals and how we want to get there and who we are with who we want to be.
Right.
Because there are some things about us that our brains are wired certain ways. I cannot change certain things about my brain. I can't. I can develop strategies and coping mechanisms and all that kind of stuff. And I have a lot of them. But that will never alter the way my brain actually functions. Right? I can work on not interrupting as much, but I can't tell my brain to stop going when it's thinking on that way, right?
Yeah, so I do agree with that.
There's things about it that like, and that's not bad, right? But a lot of my coping mechanisms, I've learned recently, been kind of diving into them. Some work and are fine, but a lot of them I use just to look like everybody else. You know what I mean? I try to just like blend in with everybody else. Don't stand out like the sore thumb, right? Don't be the weirdo over there.
Stop it.
Like when I enter a room of people, I'm a wallflower for a hot minute because I need to figure out what's happening. I need to assess the situation, what's expected of me, what's everybody else doing. Now blend in. And that's it. It is what it is, but it's all about being like everybody else, which if you think about it is weird.
Yes.
Right? Isn't that kind of weird to like
subconsciously trained to do that stuff?
Right.
But I think that absolutely comes from the way that you were probably treated in different settings and the way that it has been modeled for you. And if there's
probably
ever been
a lot
of
it.
situation where you were told to not be yourself, that's why you assess the situation first.
Right. You aren't like other people, but we need you to be like them. So just follow the rules of everybody else and make it work.
That's such a horrible thing to do. But I agree.
But that's what happens, right?
Inclinations like that too.
Yeah.
It depends on the setting and things.
Right.
Yeah.
And then like, some other that's not the worst coping mechanism I have, but there are other ones I'm like, that's kind of maladaptive, right? Like that's probably not the best way to bridge that gap in whatever deficit I see or how I'm supposed to like fit in with everybody else. And I think a lot of it just comes from that idea of trying to be like everybody else, but that's a lot of it's to detriment to me.
Sure.
And then I start thinking about how like it's also a detriment to other people that we all can't be our full selves, right? Like I should be able to be myself and be comfortable in a room. Yes. Everybody should be able to. We aren't for different reasons. But the problem is that it's that norm thing, being like everybody else. And that's so weird.
No.
Because what do we like celebrate certain celebrities for being unique? Oh, there's no one like that person. Sure. Oh, they're so special. Oh, look at this star. They're, whatever. Oh, wow, they've got this standout talent. Sure. We all do.
Right.
So sometimes it's good to be like everybody else. And every now and then it's okay to be different. But like in reality, we all are different for different, very good reasons.
Right. No, you're talking about a key takeaway from unlearning. And in today's society, it really, unlearning is so important because it leads to the destigmatization of differences and blows up those societal norms.
Exactly.
It blows it to hell. Like it really does.
Right.
And that's the other reason why I think unlearning is so important, because even in that dynamic that you were just talking about, I was just thinking about award shows. And I know recently in 2024, somebody had accepted an award. I don't know where it was, but talked about how even award shows are divisive because somebody goes home a winner and somebody goes home a loser. But the reality is
they're all making millions of dollars.
Work. Well, that too. I'm not. Here we are talking about how, and when I say we, I am not talking about this because I think this is so detrimental to people. Talking about how everybody wins a trophy nowadays.
Right.
But look at what society is showing us. Why do you have the Golden Globes, the Emmys, the Oscars, the Academy Awards, or sorry, I just said Oscars, Academy Awards. AMA Awards.
Didn't even get that they were different, but yeah.
But
I don't care enough.
Why do we have all of those things if and I get the idea that there are still people who don't all win a trophy, but
right.
how can you tell people win a trophy,
right,
but also not everyone deserves a trophy? Yeah,
right.
you can't,
and also,
because it literally is the exact opposite. It's the exact opposite.
Right.
It's telling somebody, find your worth, you win an award.
Mm-hmm.
But also, not everybody deserves an award. Okay, that I kind of understand that concept. But also, be unique enough to win yourself an award.
Not everyone deserves the same award. That I agree with.
That I agree with.
That I agree with.
100,000,000%.
If, everyone, but like I said, everyone brings something to the table. And now, I'm thinking about this as children in traditional learning, especially because I think that's where a lot of people hear a lot of these things, or not hear audibly, but receive, I should say, or you'll get a lot of these messages.
Receive is a great. Well, no, I was going to say what you were saying was receive, and I just want to be clear. When people receive those pieces of information, children receive those pieces of information in traditional settings, it is not always from the teacher.
No.
Just to be very clear.
No, 100%. No.
No.
Right. No, a lot of it is just that, like, what we all interpret as the expectation of the environment. And a lot of that really comes from every situation that we're in, every environment we're in, where we're getting messages from everything, everywhere.
Yeah.
We're getting them from media, getting them from the grocery store. We're getting them from our family. We're getting them from our friends. We're getting them from everything.
Faith-based communities. It's
right. Oh, yeah.
Community.
Yeah. Exactly.
You go outside your door, or even inside your door. Like,
and that's why building your community intentionally is so important.
Yeah, so we were just talking about, what is unlearning, why is unlearning, but now you're getting to how do we unlearn?
Yeah.
How do we do that in your mind?
I think a lot of it is, well, first we have to start identifying the messages we've received.
Right.
And I think a lot of that is, for me, what I do is I kind of will say, because I just think having practical things is more helpful to me most of the time. So I'm just going to tell you what I do. Yeah. I will sit and just be like, oh, that doesn't feel good. Whatever I'm feeling right now doesn't feel good.
Right.
Why doesn't that feel good? Oh, because I'm comparing myself to that person. Well, why am I comparing myself? Right. And so I kind of have to sit and dig a little bit. Yeah. But I usually start with what doesn't feel good to me, and then kind of go, why doesn't that feel good, and go into it. And then I'll find a message at some point in there that I've received. And then just start kind of questioning it and challenging it. Does this fit with me, who I know myself to be at this point? And I think unlearning and knowing yourself, those two things have to go together. Like, you have to know yourself on some level, but also be willing to know yourself deeper. And just figuring out why does this not feel good? What's this message? And then you can go from there.
Well, my process is basically the same. I think it started actually for me. Well, I know when it started. I was kind of reflecting on it. I think my first question for myself, the first time I really realized that, going back, that the word I was trying to figure out was that I unlearned something. We've talked about this before, how you have a very strong sense of injustice. I had a very strong sense of injustice as a child. I was the youngest for a few years, and then all of a sudden I became the middle, and so Injustice is my middle name growing up. And I think the first time I really,
as a fellow middle child, I relate.
Yeah,
I relate.
You get
yeah, I got you.
I obviously now I could joke about it, but at the time it was no joke. But I think the first time I unlearned something was probably had to do with, like, leaving people out, and knowing that I didn't feel good about somebody they didn't feel okay or right. It just didn't feel right. Like birthday parties, for instance, like in the 90s. I'm around 5 years old, and I can remember birthday parties started and certain people weren't invited. And like that, obviously a 5-year-old doesn't understand the concept of cost of birthday parties and nuances of parental relationships with each other. And all that stuff.
And they shouldn't, and that's fine.
Yeah, no, they definitely should not. But as a child, it didn't sit right with me that not everybody was always at these parties, and like, who do you tell and who do you not tell? And it was not a popular decision at all, that I shared with my friends in my elementary class. But and I know I didn't get invited to parties after I shared how I probably used words like "that's really stupid" to not include people, and attempted to use guilt,
right,
to be convincing. But it was really, I think that was probably. I'm Italian. It comes to the territory.
That's so great. I love it. I was like, oh, I can relate.
Yeah, no, it just was part of it. And
that's funny.
You know, it was just, you were talking about the golden rule. And for me, it was like, how can you be told to love your neighbor as yourself? Another one. And I saw people being cruel to one another and people feeling left out. And,
right.
You know, I think maybe that's where fighting injustice and fighting for equality and equity at a young age probably started. But like, I don't understand that piece. And I you know, going back and looking at it, you know, there's the other piece of it too. Why do I need to love someone who's mean to me and bullies me?
Oh yeah, sure.
You know, and you know, sitting with that even at a young age, and I knew I was an old soul. Like I would choose to sit with the older people in my family and listen to their stories versus going and play with my cousins.
Right.
You know, but I kept thinking about, you know, how that just didn't sit right with me. And then I started going down, you know, the process of, okay, so it didn't sit right with me, or I really believe that anger is not a natural emotion, because I think people would be able to regulate their anger more. And I think anger actually equates to sadness. So for me, I think if I get angry about something, I'm angry about it because I feel a certain way about it. So I have to go, like you talked about, down that path. Why am I angry? Why am I mad? Why am I sad?
Right.
What did I learn? Why am I feeling this way? Am I feeling guilt about something? Did I do something wrong? Like,
yeah.
But we are also talking on a children's level. And I think a lot of children can understand, even toddlers. I mean, even my children understand when something's not right. You know, if they hear somebody out in public treating somebody wrong, they look, and you can tell that even at,
it doesn't feel good to them.
2, it doesn't sit right with them.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the thing, is starting at a young age and saying, hey, what did you think about this today? How are you feeling about this?
Right.
Kids to be thinking about their thinking.
Yeah.
And it also gives them a platform to analyze with you, so you can help them to figure out what they're learning and unlearning. And I think a lot of people don't realize that at a young age, children really take in so much.
They are sponges, like literal sponges. Okay, not literal, but they are such sponges, taking in everything. Everything. Like the way you speak to yourself, they're watching that. The way you treat yourself, the way, what you say to yourself when you look in the mirror, what you say to yourself when you make a mistake or what you've deemed a mistake, what you say out loud to them when you're correcting their behavior or whatever the case may be. They're taking that in, and that's a message that they're internalizing, that they're receiving, right? And they're starting to build this worldview from those things, and you didn't mean to teach them that.
Right.
Like that's a lot of stuff I've unlearned as an adult, is things that like I inherited. You know what I mean? I've been like, wait a second, I don't know about that one. And then like going back to educate. Okay. You know, I will just sit and scroll on Instagram and TikTok for a hot minute because leave me alone. I don't know why, because it's a good brain feed for me, because I mean, it depends on how you, whatever. Okay. I'm not going to justify my scrolling. I don't care. I'm judging myself and I shouldn't be. Why do I care? It's my life. I'm going to do what I want. Okay. Plus it feeds my brain. So it was interesting. I was watching, I get a lot of stuff about homeschooling and a lot of stuff about homesteading and a lot of stuff because I'm just a homebody. So this all makes sense. Sure. And one of the ones, there's like this lady who's talking, kind of playing both roles of this conversation. She's like, so did you give your kids a little homeschool lesson today? And the lady's like, yeah. We went and we fed all the animals. We made sourdough together. We had to fix the mailbox because something was wrong with it. And then we, made dinner, whatever the case, right? Like late outlying or made lunch, whatever. And the flips to the other role and is like, no, No, hey, that's not what I asked. I said, did you do a lesson with them, a formal structured lesson where they were learning?
Ooh.
But they were learning the whole time because, when it came to the sourdough, we had to measure things out in grams and we converted them to kilograms. We used all the math to do that kind of stuff. So we made some really, did that. We talked about the process of like the chemical reaction between the leavening and what that does over time and why the bubbles in the bread form and all that kind of stuff. And then when we fixed the mailbox, we were measuring things. We were doing some math there. And then, when we were outside feeding the animals, we were walking everywhere. That's good physical activity. And we were talking about hanging out with the animals. So they're learning animal science, all this stuff too, right? Duh. Of course, all that learning is happening. Because if you're intentional about talking about it, you're intentional about doing it, that's amazing learning. Sure. And stuff that's going to stick with them better than sitting in a chair, because when we're engaged, we learn better, right? Sure. And so the flip to the other, like, well, yeah, but did you give them any tests? Like, how do you know they're actually learning? And so I was sitting there and I was like, this is it, right? This is the idea this is one of the big things to unlearn.
Right.
You don't have to sit at a desk. You don't have to be doing a worksheet. You don't have to be listening with that active listening of body still, my eyes on me, hands closed, da, 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 right? Like that, those things don't automatically mean learning is happening. Sure. And the absence of those things doesn't mean learning isn't happening. So like, that's a big thing to unlearn, is what we think learning looks like.
Right.
You know what I mean? And even as educators, how often were we trying to say, you don't have to test with a multiple choice test. You don't have to test with a paper test. There are so many ways you can gather information about if someone's learning or not to have that documentation that you need for certain reasons. But like, learning should be fun. It should be hands-on. Like, these are all great things, right. But because we're so used to learning in a traditional sense, we don't see the value in these other things, even though that's really great learning and learning experiences.
Right.
So kind of like there's so much to unlearn because when it comes to ourselves, but also within the realm of learning, there's so much to unlearn.
Yeah.
And if we all are different, like, let's explore that. I think that's like the best avenue to start with, is finding your differences, finding for yourself who you are, going through those messages, unlearning all that stuff so you can celebrate who you are. You can align who you are with who you want to be. And then you start giving that to other people around you.
Yeah. I mean, 1,000,000%.
And it's like you said, it's life-changing stuff. It's so freeing because you're not sitting there holding yourself to an expectation that doesn't align with who you are. The things in you that you can't actually change. The things in you that you probably shouldn't change. Because you're given them for a reason, and that might be your genius. But if you're keeping that tapped down to try to be like everybody else, then you're hiding your genius. And that is a shame to the rest of us.
Right.
I don't hide your genius from me. I want to learn from you. Come on, get it. Like, let's do this together. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I'm taking everything in that you're saying. Because
no, I know. I just felt like I was talking too long. I got on my like no. I was behind my pulpit for a second or something, and I was just like, woo!
I just
had a body experience. But
yeah, it really is incredible how unlearning is, even just at a basic level. Like, it's exciting and it's exhilarating and it's motivating.
It's work and hard work.
It is hard work. It definitely is, and
it's a lot easier to get those messages in than to break them and get them out.
Oh, yeah.
Especially,
sure.
We have to think about in anything that we're doing. You have to consider the fact that, like, for me, for example, right? I am 40 years old. So if I received some messages when I was 5, that's 35 years I've been living in that message.
Yeah.
You cannot expect to undo that one message in a month when it's been sitting there for 35 years.
Right.
It's work and it's active work, but doing the work is that's, to me, some of the best work you can do.
Oh, it's extraordinary what comes out of it.
Yeah.
And you're talking about 35 years, which to somebody might sound like a long time, but how many people do you know who have 65 years?
I was going to say to others, it's like, oh, only 35 years?
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's the really important part too, because sometimes it can just feel so overwhelming to start unlearning. And sometimes it can also feel like not quite at your grasp. So I guess there are a couple of things that, I think about in terms of asking questions and things like that. But I would say you first have to really start with being vulnerable, and you do have to try it yourself before you try to be a learning mentor to somebody else.
Yes.
Because you can't really figure it out and teach it if you don't fully understand it.
Right.
But it's very simple to start. I think you can start with like, how do you feel about yourself as a learner?
Yeah.
What have other people told you?
About exactly.
How, or what you offer, or what you're capable of.
Yep. And because my next question is always why. So here's what I feel. Now I need to explore the why. And that's with anything, right? Oh, this kid is demonstrating this behavior. Okay, I've identified it. My next question is why? In all things, we should be asking why.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, and listen, I am not an expert in unlearning. There are so many voices out there that, like, Brene Brown is amazing in talking about this. Like, there are just so many people out there who can give much better advice on the act of unlearning for yourself. But I'm with you. Yeah, it just starts with asking yourself the questions, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, there are great podcasts out there too that also teach you
tons of them. I didn't mean to put any, that was just the first name that came to mind.
No, I know.
He's out there a lot, but came to mind, there's so many good ones.
I know it's interesting too, because it's not even the idea of unlearning sometimes. I like the title of unlearning. For me, as a human being, I need a working definition and a working word.
Right.
But I was thinking about when you had said Brene Brown, I love listening to Steve Harvey and Tyler Perry personally. And Jay Sheedy is another one out there who I like. It's very inspirational, but it also really makes you think.
Right.
And I think that's the thing too, is I don't know that we're all taught how to think in a metacognitive way.
Yeah. Do you know who I think is really good at that?
Huh.
Comedians.
Oh, they're so good at it.
I love it. Like, I could sit and listen to like Theo Vaughn. I could sit and listen to like Shane Gillis. Like they to me will just sit and like Dave Chappelle is amazing, right? At looking at a thing in society and then questioning it and making you see like that is really
Adam
stupid.
Sandler,
Why do
Chris
we do
Rock.
that? Right. Like all sorts of people. So it's really interesting. And that's something that I've always done, is seeing things differently. So I love that. And like, for me, that's kind of an easy route to go, but I don't think it's easy for everybody.
No,
so I like that, like what you're saying, just starting with like, who am I? Who am I as a learner? What are my strengths?
Right.
What are now, I personally used to have a very hard time with the word weaknesses.
Oh, I don't like that.
So let's reframe it. Yeah. What are my areas of growth? A weakness says that it's stuck that way, right? But an area of growth, it's just something I can work on. I can improve.
Well, it also goes back to what is failure. If you call it a weakness, there's some negative association like there is with failure. So you have to reconfigure it. And you talked about areas of growth. I think it can also be, what are some areas that I want to change or improve? Or I mean, I think that they're kind of synonymous, but I would say,
but because of our internalized messages, some of those feel better than others, right? So it's that too. Like, that's why I'm such a fan of reframing words, for sure. Like you're saying, yes. To me, it's so important.
To start with unlearning.
Yeah.
I recently had a conversation with some older people about, our podcast and where we want to go with things and stuff.
Yeah.
And they were very shocked that there are human beings out there who can be, I was talking about how I worked in that 18 to 21-year-old classroom with, kids with all different learning, I hate the word disabilities, other abilities. And I was talking about a couple of them were nonverbal. And I generalize because I certainly I would never personalize any of that because it's private information and all
Right,
that
right.
kind of stuff. But to hear that people much older than myself didn't know that there are people out there who are nonverbal at an older age was very interesting to hear.
Right.
And when I was asked questions like, how do you communicate with them? I'm like, well, I'm communicating with you, but I'm doing it in the easiest possible format because it's the one that we're almost used to. And they were like, what? And it was really kind of an interesting conversation for me to know at some point in time, I probably didn't know that either.
100%.
And
so I'm not going to hold that against anybody.
Yeah.
Ever.
One of the women was like, I feel so dumb. And I was like, oh my gosh, why do you feel dumb?
Why? Yeah.
And her husband, it was really interesting. Her husband was like, why would you feel dumb? You've never seen anyone. You've never been exposed. You never, whatever. And it's just really interesting too.
Because what she meant was I feel guilty that I haven't thought about people other than myself, maybe. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I haven't thought that, I'm used to what I'm used to.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you're dumb. It just means you hadn't seen it. Like that's, totally different situation. Yeah.
It is interesting too because it depends on where, like, a lot of it comes from where you grow up and the things that you're exposed to at a young age.
Sure.
Like one of my parents worked at a higher education institution that has a very large deaf community.
Okay.
And so for me, I was around people who in my mind were nonverbal because I did not know sign language.
Right.
At a very young age. I was also around people of all different races and cultures at a very young age and exposed to different food at a very young age. And really didn't realize, it is good stuff. But this is the other part of it too. I didn't know there are people out there who
didn't have that experience. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you go out into the world and you figure out how much you need to unlearn, how much you hope to inspire other people to unlearn.
Yeah.
And there's just so much out there. But a lot of what you're talking about, I think that's so important is when something doesn't sit right with you, sometimes it's because of lack of exposure. And that is a form of unlearning.
Right.
Just put yourself in an uncomfortable situation and then blow up that box.
100%.
There's just so much power in unlearning.
Agreed. Yeah, like, another example kind of similar is one of a student I work with is very low verbal expression. Like she can speak. She's not nonverbal. And I don't think she has selective mutism either. But there are just times she doesn't feel comfortable talking.
Right.
That girl gives me so much information. She communicates so much. Like there's so many other ways to get information out of each other than speaking.
Right.
Do I have to be creative? Yeah. Do I have to be like, does it go as quick? No. But do we get as much done? Yes. Can I still see what she can do? 1,000% yes. Like it's not like I wouldn't go and say, I wouldn't go to China, for example, right? And walk around and be like, none of these people speak English. God, they're so stupid. What? How do you like, obviously you don't know anything because you can't tell me what you know in my language. So you don't know anything. They're probably way smarter than me, but we're not speaking the same language. And that's the only thing that's there. Right. And so even looking at it that way and unlearning that speaking the same language means, or being able to communicate what you know is the only way to say that you know something.
Right.
Like there's so many other, I don't know. It's just, there's so many ways to look at things. And I was just thinking that a lot of this comes down to like respect.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And what I think respect is.
I don't think.
But that's the thing, right? Within this unlearning, it's a matter of defining so many of these words for yourself. And I think some people have a definition of respect that's not mine. I would say that respect is that, we are all equal. We all bring us, like, your voice is as valid as my voice. My voice is as valid as your voice. Should we talk over each other? No. We need to let each other speak. We need to listen to each other and then learn from each other. Like, if we aren't doing that, then what are we doing? You know what I mean?
Not being human.
Right. Right. So in this whole thing of unlearning, you could even just start with certain definitions. If it's too hard, because it's a lot to go inside yourself and start digging around.
Oh yeah, it's a very vulnerable.
You got to get your hazmat suit on. You got to get your shit shovel. Oh, sorry. You got to get your shovel and you got to start digging around. And that is, it can be very hard.
Yes, it can.
Some of us need a gas mask more than others. Me, I need it because it's bad. But like at the same time,
ultimately so rewarding.
100%. Yeah.
It's just so
but if it's too much to start there and go all the way in, I get that. I can totally understand it. Yeah. And that's why I really think starting with how would I define certain words?
Yeah.
How do I define intelligence? How do I define like my strengths? How do I define success? What does success look like for me? Because I'll tell you right now, other people will be like, oh yeah, having 3 sports cars in my front yard and just going to Jamaica every other weekend. That's success.
Sure.
Cool. I get that. That's not my definition of success.
Right.
But I get that that's what yours is. And that's totally fine. So like even things like that, what is success to you? What is failure to you? Like just kind of defining some of those words that for yourself, what do you think this means? And then dig into the why of those. Why do I think success is only this? Why do I define myself by these certain things?
Yeah. It's so interesting. I immediately just had a flashback to a session this week with one of my 13-year-olds. And we were talking about
God bless 13-year-olds. That's a hard time, man.
Oh my gosh. It really is such a hard time. You know what? That's why I always loved middle school.
Yeah.
I loved teaching in middle school.
Me too.
It's such a hard place to be. And there's so much to learn about yourself. And that piece, I think I've always really been in love with unlearning. Mm-hmm. Because, you were talking about in your sessions and in mine, I find the very first place to go in the first 5 or 6 sessions while building a rapport, which can happen very quickly, even in a remote situation, is like, who are you? Yeah. And then listening to a 13-year-old talk about what success means to them and hearing them stumble and realize that it's not actually what they believe is so intense of a feeling to hear.
Yes.
I had one with one of my college students too. And they were talking about how they were really stressed out before finals and, all they want to do is get this grade. And I was like, okay, let's just talk about right now in the next week, what are your top 3 motivators? Like, what are your goals? What does success look like?
Right.
And it was totally different from what we had talked about for the first 45 minutes of the session.
Right.
And it was, I want to prioritize my mental health. I need to get out there and exercise.
Right.
I want to do, X, Y, and Z, and I want to study for this amount of time. Because then we started talking about the science behind brain function and overstudying and all these different things. Yeah. It's a really fascinating place to be, to hear young people realize that what they even thought are things that they live on a daily basis believing.
Right.
When they sit down and think about it and are given that opportunity to speak, it is not at all what their actual priorities are.
And then we start feeding messages to ourselves based on that difference, right? Based on the fact that but my gut reaction is this definition. But if I really think about it, it's a totally different one. And the fact that those don't match up, does that tell me something's wrong with me? No. Right. We're measuring ourselves by the wrong barometer.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the wrong measurement tool. And that to me is like the underlying part of unlearning, is that if you're holding yourself to a standard that is unattainable for you,
and not your own.
Yes, you will fail at every possible thing you try. 100% you will. Yeah. Because that wasn't made for you.
100%.
So why hold yourself to that expectation, to that standard, when you weren't even thought of when they made that standard? You know what I mean?
Society, for sure.
Right.
Although I just kind of had an epiphany. Tell me what you think about this one. That I would venture to guess.
I almost burst out in song with the start of that. Whew, sorry. I would have walked 500 miles and I would have walked. Okay, sorry.
I'm kind of seeing that, honestly. My whole like Robert Frost, Two Roads Diverge.
Yeah.
I love you. I love the randomness. Like, truly. I was singing the exact same song, but I was
It's fun up here sometimes.
No, I'm very much the
I love it so much.
That's why we complete each other.
I mean, but it makes life so much more fun. Like, what's it like to have just a conversation where you stay on topic? And it's about, that's why, like, I go so hard for this because I think we hurt ourselves so deeply. And like you said, we hold ourselves back with all of our strength as opposed to pushing ourselves forward with all of our strength when we limit ourselves to these unattainable things. Just at the end of the day, I just truly believe that we are all made the way we're supposed to be made. And I just believe everybody brings something to the table. Everybody is capable of learning, growth, and change. And I do mean everybody.
Yeah, I know, I do too.
Everybody.
It's interesting too, because you're bringing all this stuff up and I'm realizing that there are a lot of people out there who are like, oh my gosh, this is like unlearning. Wow. That's like kind of a revelation. And like, I'm not sure where to start. Let's start here. Honestly, I was kind of thinking about, I go back a lot to like business and the business world. Mm-hmm. And I was just thinking, in every college interview, in every interview that should ever exist anywhere, I don't care where it is.
Yeah.
A great question would be, what do you think about learning?
Right?
It would throw somebody off so much because I bet you most people don't even think about it. What do you think about learning? Like, not how are you as a learner? Because I feel like there are some situations where that is actually asked. Right. But like, what do you think about learning? And somebody who needs more information would say, like, can you give me a little bit more context? Mm-hmm. And the idea of the question is to get someone to open up and get them thinking about their thinking in a circumstance where they haven't prepared. Because that's another thing. How many YouTube videos, how many things out there on Pinterest or whatever where it's like ace your interview? You know, I want to know a real person. I want to ask them real questions. I want to make sure, they're in a good place to be successful in a position. And I don't think that's another thing that is always thought of in the business world. My husband tells me quite often, whenever I was in a situation where I was feeling a lot of pressure to perform or do something, and success for me was always being the best and breaking myself until I got to that point where I felt that I was that. Whether I was or not, it didn't really matter. And then I realized when I was unlearning that whole piece that it was really more about my success was actually acts of service. Mm-hmm. And I felt best and most successful when I was able to serve others. Right. But oftentimes, he would say, like, if you died tomorrow, they'd replace you immediately. Right. Like, because that's how the world works. And for me, that was extremely helpful in unlearning what I felt value was, because
God bless partners for that.
Whew. Oh my gosh, I know. It's
being
amazing.
That mirror that you didn't realize you needed. And that's, again, why building your community is so crucial.
Oh yeah, especially when unlearning. That's the other thing. None of this you should really be doing alone. And really, while you can learn a lot on your own, you need stimuli usually, or you need to sit with yourself. Meditation, honestly, in my mind, is also a great place to unlearn. Because you go so far inside yourself and you actually take time to quiet your mind and your body. And
if you can do that.
Yeah.
I personally can't do that. It takes, No, I haven't built those muscles yet personally. Yeah. So, but I feel like if I could, I could see the value in it for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a solid, I love doing, I'm a huge proponent of the Calm app. I tell every learner that I work with, I tell my parents, I tell my family members, I tell everybody, literally everybody. I really am a poster child for it, because we got it free during the pandemic through the school that we were working at the time. And that was really quite a gift because I couldn't quiet myself because I had so much time at home to work.
Right. And, gotcha.
Focus on other things. And so it started with, I couldn't even do a minute. And then I could do 3, and then I could do 5. And the really cool part about when you find a voice to listen to when you're starting to learn meditation is, the idea of just come back to the breath, or just come back to yourself, or let these things kind of float away like a cloud. It's really quite an interesting concept.
Yeah.
And it goes back to my whole platform of, mental health. Unlearning is a form of self-love, radical self-love and acceptance. Yep. And it also is a place where if you're feeling like you can't even focus on it from a learning perspective, you would be still learning about unlearning by thinking of it as a mental health piece. And
yes,
like that's a whole other thing I learned, and I know you and I have talked about it, is that when people talk about taking care of yourselves and your health, people think about exercise or eating right or whatever.
Right.
No. Your health is to take care of your entire vessel and being.
Yes.
And that's something that I unlearned that was a huge thing. Like mental health is absolutely, it's your brain.
Right.
Like it's your brain, it's your emotional functioning. It's everything that you are day in and day out, on top of your muscular system, your skeletal system, your, all of that. So
for me, like I realized like that is a huge piece. And I realized that my body, my physical body was so sick at one point. Like again, we've talked about this before, how like the pandemic really, that pause in life changed a lot of things for both of us. And it made me realize that my physical body was so sick from trying to fit into the mold of like this 8 to 5 work. Well, really, let's be honest. I was working.
Yeah, it wasn't 8 to 5.
Yeah, I left my house at I left my house at 6:30 in the morning. Would get home at 5. Then I would work for another 3 to 4 hours after that.
Yeah.
Then I would make dinner. Then I would sit on the couch and pass out. Because that's what society said I was supposed to do. You're supposed to work. That's what you're supposed to do. And you need to make the money. And you need to do da-da-da-da-da. And I had to realize none of that works for who I actually am. I am not opposed to hard work. I love work. I love like doing things. I really, really do. So it's not about like working hard or anything like that. I have a very strong work ethic. But for me, I realized that this expectation of going to this sounds so weird, but going to a job every day, not it for me. Doesn't work for me. That's not who I am. When I come home from being around people, I'm exhausted. It's tiring for me. So small talk during the day can be fun and distracting, but like it can also be a lot of work that like I didn't realize exhausted me because I was just so used to doing it. But like now I'm exhausted when I do it because I'm not used to doing it. All of those things are like just the, humans in America, everyone has to work and everyone has to have a side hustle and da-da-da-da-da. I was killing myself.
Right.
I was having autoimmune flare-ups so often. And now that I've changed all that and learned that norm doesn't work for me, and I've made changes, I haven't had a flare-up in, at least it's not a sustained one, maybe like a little bit here and there, but nothing like what I was in years.
Yeah. It's been like, what, 4 years? 3 years? 4 years?
3. Yeah. About 3. So like trying to keep up with these norms and trying to be something that we're not is killing us.
Yeah.
Like emotionally and physically. And I think we all just need to kind of examine these things and see, does it work for me? And like a lot of the messages we receive, it is a fact, like some kind of factual information, but then there's always this like emotional spin on it. Right? Of like, oh, here's how my brain works. Like, it's not just a matter of, let's just say IQ, which I think is a silly thing anyway, but that's a topic for a whole nother day.
Yeah.
But you could look and give some people an IQ test, right? And then kind of say, all right, well, here's now, like, all right, so you're really smart and you're really this, and you're just not going to do so well because you're just average, right? According to, again, I don't believe that. I'm just saying what the IQ test and how it's typically used.
Right.
But at the same time, you could look at those same people and like say, oh, here's someone with an average IQ, but they are so much more successful financially or whatever the case may be from the person with the really high IQ. Like, it really doesn't matter.
No,
and so
it
and
truly
then
doesn't.
but we all have these views when we're younger of like, what, so you're in this class, oh, that must mean that you are that's so much more value. No, that's just how their brain works. Like, it's not this extended judgment thing, right? Like, why can't we just say, this is how my brain works, that's a factual statement, the end. This is what I need, that's a factual statement, the end. Like, there's all this other feelings put on it. I don't know. Is it really? I guess it's feelings. And that's the part of that we need to unlearn. Some things are just factual, and that's okay.
Sure.
That's fine. That's good. But just kind of, I think
that's a great example, though, because I'm thinking of, while I was in school, there were a couple of kids in my elementary school who were not successful, who were deemed troublemakers, whatever. And when they did standardized testing, they bombed, or when they were in the classroom, they bombed. But when they did the IQ testing, they were off the charts.
Right.
Off the charts.
Right.
So their IQ was exceptional.
Yeah.
And then we're not doing well in school. And then there were other kids whose IQ were far lower.
Right.
And were super successful according to traditional standards.
Right.
I think that's a great example, too, because it goes back to value.
Right.
And by having to take those tests, you're showing somebody that their intelligence in particular is valued or not valued.
Right. And the reality is that the kid with the higher IQ that wasn't showing the success on that one probably wasn't being given what they needed in the way they needed it.
Oh, yeah. There was no personalized education at all in that sense.
And so, like, if you take that person and put them in a different environment, put them in a different realm, like, it would be different. Not that the end goal is for everyone to score high on standardized tests by any means. Mm-hmm. But it's like, we look at those situations and then extrapolate the wrong conclusion.
Right.
Or come to the wrong conclusion or whatever. Yeah, extrapolate the wrong things and come to the wrong conclusion.
Very blessed to go to the schools that I went to.
That's how I feel.
And I actually loved every single one of my educators.
That's amazing.
There was one that said some really awful stuff about me because I was not getting straight A's at the time.
Oh my God, that is terrible. I never got straight A's. Well, that's not true, but they're overrated.
Oh, please understand that, like, me getting straight A's was me vomiting every night.
Well, that's what I was about to say, right? Like, there are some people that, like, okay, straight A's, no big deal. I can do that easily and, like, whatever.
Yeah.
But
I got it at the expense of my mental health.
Exactly. And so why is that the message that we're putting out there? Why do we want people to do that?
I know. And to be fair,
that's so silly.
My parents didn't send out that message to me.
Exactly. No, right.
I have an older sister who's 14 months apart from me.
Right.
She got straight A's. She never studied. She never did anything. She was just very, just academically inclined in a traditional sense.
Sure.
And I saw that, and I saw the accolades, and I was like, I will do anything. And you know, over time, we became so different. Like, I was very into the arts. I was very into sports. And she was very into books. And then I was like, okay, well, I don't like reading because that's her thing. And again, this was nothing that was taught to me. It just was reading too long.
I love books. I love information. Sometimes
you're one of the best listeners on tape people that I know. Like,
I have to be focused. It just depends. Like, I do like that because I can do something at the same time, which usually helps me focus better.
Yeah, me too.
Whether I read a book, whether I read through listening like an audiobook, either way, I have to focus. And that's the hard part. It's easier.
I fell in love.
But
I fell in love with reading when I started teaching. And I was
gotcha.
like, I actually love every single book that I am either forced to
I
teach.
definitely started liking reading a lot more after school.
Oh yeah,
than I did. Yeah,
because it's because of choice, which is why I'm so into like voice and choice and all that kind of nonsense.
100%, right?
What people think is nonsense, but what I think is inspirational and great, and it inspires kids to want to do things like read.
And when it comes to, you were saying earlier, like, so these are things as kids that we kind of received or whatever. And then when it comes to adults, we also are looking at, as an employee, I would look around and be like, but why aren't we just using everybody's strengths? Wouldn't that just make us all wouldn't that just be the ideal way to go?
I know.
But we have to tap in and honor, and everyone needs to just come as who they are and not, it's a lot. It's a lot. But it would make the world a lot better, I think.
I know. I always think about that phrase, shout out to Dr. Missy Ribner, who is one of like my favorite humans on earth, but also was quite possibly one of the best leaders. I don't call her a boss, even though she was my boss.
I don't like the word boss.
But she used to say, I want to put the right people in the right seats on the right bus.
100%.
And I think she should write a book about that kind of concept, because that was always her MO, is putting people in a place where they could shine, where she could honor them, where she can help them to grow. And if anybody ever was in a position where they wanted to leave for growth or because they needed it, she always would help them get to where they wanted to go. Always.
Right. Because it's all about people and honoring people.
Right. And people don't do that. And we talk about, you were talking about,
because that's not what society says, right? Society says, it's all about the dollar. The end. There is no other metric. At least American society, I should say.
In terms of like business in particular, when you go into an interview, you're selling your value to people who do not know you.
Right.
And you also have to do it in sometimes an hour or less, sometimes 30 minutes or less. Sometimes you get barely any time because they realize you're not the right person because you said something wrong or didn't say what they wanted or whatever.
And sometimes you get hired and you still have to keep doing that for your entire employment history.
And then that's a whole other thing. Yeah. Then you get hired, and then your whole entire piece is you have to continue to grow in your value in order to stay.
Right. But also stay within your lines and your lanes.
Yes.
Don't grow too much. Don't grow. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are some businesses out there that are incredible. I had a family member who worked at Google, and he had an incredible experience. And I know Google is like super lofty, but like I've had incredible experiences in schools, and my husband has stayed at the same company for I'm not even going to say how long. It's since he was out of college.
Minute. Right.
Yeah, no. It's had different iterations and been bought and whatever, but
I think that's amazing. But also, like, when someone says that to me, I'm like, I would die personally.
I know, isn't that wild?
But I love that for other people that they can do that, right? Because I'm like, dude, that's amazing. Respect.
Well, the amount of growth that it's based on the amount of growth that a place can have too.
Right. True. Yeah.
And I think that's the hard part about sometimes being in education is, how can you continue to grow? Because I don't know that in traditional education settings, there's always that opportunity for everyone. It is there. It is there.
Adults, everybody.
Yeah, no, it truly is.
Yeah.
It's truly, and even parents, honestly, there 100%. Are parents out there. Hopefully I am going to be one of those who wants to do things to change the community to be better and to do more and to be very involved and et cetera. But I think that's true of so many businesses. And you talk about adult unlearning, and it's hard to go home at the end of a day when you may be burned out and sit and be like, okay, I'm going to, do some shadow work, or I'm going to do some unlearning today, or I'm going to sit here and think about whatever. You talk about how you're a wallflower in situations, and typically I'm very social going into situations, to the point where one of the messages that I was given was, oh, you're a bit too much. Like,
I think a lot of women get that message, dude. A lot of women get that message.
But I only just unlearned that, even after being married, even after being with someone for
that's
12
hard.
years.
Right.
He has been such a help in that, but I needed to do that unlearning myself.
Yeah.
So
agreed.
I think it's a wild ride.
It is, and again, it's such a big thing. There's so many pieces of it as it relates to learning.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like as adults, there are more adults that have internal struggles because of messages they received when they were very young. I think a
that's what I was
lot
going
of
to
us,
say.
yeah.
I was going to remember when I started with, I would venture to guess.
Okay.
So, and then
I don't remember, but that's not a you thing. That's a me thing.
500 miles.
Oh, right. Sorry. That's
yes.
Well, that's why I don't remember, because I sang a song. Oh God, Amber.
So I would venture to guess, is what I was going to say earlier, that 98 to 99% of what people have to unlearn was something that was taught to them by a learning mentor, whether that's a parent, someone in your family, someone older typically, or someone of the same age, I guess, like a peer. But that, I think that's where most of the unlearning actually comes from.
I would definitely agree. And I would bet that a large majority of that is covert messages versus overt messages, right? Like those messages we inferred or received subconsciously. No one explicitly taught it to us, but we somehow took information and created a message that we internalized.
Yeah. I think in today's world, it's probably more 50-50 what people are
maybe.
taking
Okay, that's
in
fair.
from
That's fair.
media and things like that. But I do believe that.
But even that, I mean, a lot of what we receive from media, it's like we're I have to be that way.
Right, exactly.
You know what I mean? But other times there are flat out things like, if someone just says you are whatever, and then, okay, that's the message now. Thank you for that. Thanks for being so direct.
I think that's another thing that in this kind of age of, I call it super technology, but in the sense of being inundated, there's a lot more of not being as in touch because of the subliminal messages our children are receiving constantly. And the thing you have to unlearn is that anything traditional that you believed in your own upbringing or how your parents brought you up, it's not the same nowadays for children, just because of they're sponges and they're taking all these things in, and things that you see in front of you are not necessarily what they are actually going through.
Right.
So having these conversations are very vital. As much as how are you feeling today? Why are you feeling that way?
Yeah.
And letting a child sit with
and
that.
having those relationships. I mean, just having a safe place where you can discuss those things as a child or an adult, especially a teenager. That is pivotal. Like, that's huge. Right. To have a safe space to start taking apart some of these things, or sharing what the messages you're receiving and hearing someone else help you shift your mindset. Like, help your husband helped you kind of hear or work on that part of yourself. It's so important, that safe space, and not creating a safe space perpetuates a lot of those messages we received, because we keep them, we're stuck with them, and it's hard.
And it's giving a platform, it's having a safe space. Yeah. And it's also knowing that every single human needs a community or a space to be able to do this.
Yep.
This is not work. We are not meant to be alone. Humans are not meant to be alone. We are meant to use our minds, our brains, to learn and, I believe, unlearn things. I think that's
I also, at the same time, don't think that we're supposed to be within noise all of the time either.
No, I don't think it's natural at all.
Yeah, I think but society has made it that we are, we have a lot of, and not just even audible noise, but distraction. There's a lot of that. Whereas,
then we can't sit and think.
Walk outside and put your feet in the grass. You know what I mean? That's a beautiful message. Do that. That's so much more grounding and healing than anything else. But I think, it's just, this is the place to start to help yourself heal, and then extend that to others, especially the kids in your life. Because if we can help them start appreciating themselves, seeing their value, building in positive messages, as opposed to these ones where we think these untrue messages, right? Like, that's going to give them, they're going to have to do less unlearning as they get older.
And that is,
they just get to dive right into life. You know what I mean? Because sometimes I yeah, like these kind of things, they, like you said, we hold ourselves back. And if we didn't have as much to unlearn, how much further would we be? So that's the gift we can give to those coming up behind us, is hopefully giving them something they don't have to unlearn from,
100%.
Or at least giving them the tools so that when these things come up, they have tools to go through and like, okay, let me go through my system. Is this a true statement? Yes or no?
Right.
Do I really do I believe this? Do I need to believe this? Yes or no? Like what kind of system, what kind of method can they use to kind of look at a message and put it through like a decision tree in a way and decide, do I need to keep this or not? And yeah, I don't know. It's so powerful. It's very hard, but it's so life-changing. And I think as you're doing this with kids, it can help you heal yourself and vice versa.
100%.
So whichever you want to be, the chicken or the egg, it doesn't matter. Just start somewhere and then see where it goes. And yeah, I think it's, the more you work on unlearning, the more you see things that you don't align with, messages you don't believe, norms you don't agree with. Like, I feel like the more I think about it, the more I'm like, yeah, none of this matches who I am.
Oh, I know. It's wild. You were talking about everything you were just talking about made me think of one time I had seen a video of this dad who was like, in the age of vaccines, I believe in, and you kind of are anticipating him going down this like anti-vaxxing situation. And the platform is not political at all, but he's like, I believe in vaccinating my children against, racism and
neat.
and that thing. And, and doing that. So when they're older, they don't have to deal with, essentially he was talking about unlearning.
Point. Yeah. Right.
Because
that's
then
such
they
a cool way to say
it. Isn't it cool?
Yeah.
I thought it was cool, especially when, vaccines and all that are like a huge topic of discussion. Right. But the idea of
versus having chickenpox parties. Oh, well, you're going to get it. You might as well get it. So now we're all going to get shingles too. Thanks. You could have given me the vaccine and I wouldn't have to deal with that then or in a couple years. Right. That's so interesting. What a great point. I love that.
I know. It was really cool. And
this is why, again, I don't believe all social media is bad. I think there's so much good out there. And like, even things like ADHD, right? There are so many other ways to look at it. It's not, I don't think of it as a disorder. I think of it as, all right, that's how that brain is wired. Cool. Yeah. And it's different for everybody too. Like, you might have the same diagnosis, but it's going to manifest differently in everybody. So just get to know who you are, who everybody is, strengths, areas of growth. And when we talk about areas of growth, what are you aligning, like matching that up to say, oh, I need to grow because, right? Like, are you saying it because of some societal expectation that you will never meet? Or are you saying it because you've actually looked inside and said, you know what, I kind of want to work on this part of myself. I want to be more generous. I want to be more patient. I want to slow things down. Like, whatever it is, deciding for yourself, why is it an area of growth?
Right.
Why do I see this as a strength? Why do I see this as a challenge? Could be another way to start the process too.
Yeah, I think working backwards, like we talked about before, identifying success is a great way to start.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That was big stuff, man.
Big stuff.
I think now I'm like emotionally tired after this conversation. That was a lot of thinking.
It is a lot of thinking. It's a lot of
feeling.
I am inspired.
But at the same time, honoring that too. So like in this unlearning process, knowing that it's going to be like a physical workout. You will be tired. You will be spent. It could be hard at times. Keep going. There's so much freedom in it. Like, I feel like I have so much more self-confidence going through these things. I don't need as much external validation as I used to, because I've created the validation internally. So I don't need it as much externally. And that, man, that's been life-changing. I'll tell you what. That's pretty cool. So that would be my encouragement, is to like, just keep going.
Right.
It's interesting. It's good times.
Very interesting. Love it. Love.
Agreed.
All right.
Alrighty. What's on your to-do list today? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I hope it's fun stuff on your list.
Yeah. It's snowing a lot here, so I'm going to be super present with my kids and see if they want to.
You make some snow cream?
Oh, no, you sent me that, but I haven't done that. But we did just buy these, they're molds, so you can make tiny snowmen out of snow.
Oh my God, how cute.
Flowers and stuff. Yeah, I'll send pics.
That's fun. Oh, I love it. Can't wait to see. Well, have fun. Thanks. I'm going to go take a nap after this powerful discussion. And all right, I'll see you next time.
See ya. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to Everything is Learning.
We'll catch you next time.